Through all the ages of mankind, the wonder and the thought of a higher being has captivated us. Over hundreds of years, many have created their own gods, but there is one that has withstood the test of time. Perhaps it is merely a legend, or a simple fairy tale, or perhaps, just perhaps, this one God is more than just a story from a book.
Okay, it's that time.
Can't I stay up just a little bit longer, Auntie Bear?
Oh, I don't think your parents would appreciate that much now.
They wouldn't mind.
Are you sure about that?
Well, if you read me a story, they wouldn't mind.
Oh, little negotiator.
How about this one?
I have a story. It's an old story. It's a fairy tale.
Ooh, I love fairy tales. Does this one have a sword fight, and a dragon, and a princess?
Well, I guess you could say so. But I know for sure it starts as all fairy tales should.
I know. Once upon a time.
Once upon a time, there lived a perfect village, more pleasant than you and I could imagine, and more beautiful than what you and I have known. This village was placed in a green, lush valley, surrounded by hills covered in heather and clover. The name of this village was Adamah. As mentioned before, Adamah was a perfect village. In Adamah, no one was ever sick or homeless, and food was plentiful. Everyone was patient and kind, and it would be unthinkable to anger. Of course, perfection does not come naturally, and it was the same in this village. For everything good and lovely came from their great ruler, King Jireh. He was a strong and just king, and yet he ruled with love and mercy. There was not a villager he did not know personally and by name. He never thought it below himself to be amongst his people, but found great pleasure in every moment with them. You could say he was much more than a mere king. His name was known in every corner of the world and was thought of as the greatest king that ever lived. He held back nothing from his people and gave them everything they wanted. But there was only one thing in the whole village that was forbidden: the tree of Adamah. You see, this was more than a simple tree. It contained the power to see good and evil and to live by their consequences. King Jireh insisted on being the one to hold such a power. He told his people he wanted them to live free and full lives, apart from the suffering and hurt the rest of the world knew. The village of Adamah knew his heart and trusted their king, so they did not touch it. Of course, have you noticed when there is a sign saying wet paint, you find yourself wanting to touch it? This is where our story begins. The villagers thought it was a day like any other day. If they only knew what it truly brought, they may have thought very differently. Travelers often came through Adamah, and it was not uncommon to see a new face in town. People traveled far and wide to see if such a village could really exist. But today brought in a new kind of traveler, not one seeking the perfect village or visiting family and friends, but one who came with evil and deceit on his mind, Draco. Draco was a king in his own right, but he was not a strong and just king like Jireh. He was a king of lies. Many years before, Draco was thrown out of the plentiful region of Adamah for his deceitful and wicked ways. It has been said that evil is not the opposite of good, but the absence of good. This would make Draco more evil than anyone could imagine. Draco lived for two things: to remove King Jireh as he had been removed, and to transform Adamah into what he thought it should be, becoming the ultimate king. Draco was evil, but he was smart as well. He knew he could never defeat Jireh on his own. He would need an army, the very people who served the king. He would have to convince them that he was superior and not only support him, but to long for his reign. The only thing was how. How do you convince a village to follow you when they have the perfect king and no needs, no wants? It was going to be difficult. Perhaps, he thought, his thinking was wrong. What was something they could not have? Was there such a thing? Then, like a bolt of lightning, it struck him. The tree of Adamah. How perfect, he laughed. The only one thing King Jireh withheld. Draco would not only remove the king, but show the village of Adamah what it meant to suffer. He would have to lay low, sneak his way in like a snake. He would live up to his name. He had done it. It was easier than he could have ever dreamed. They now held the knowledge they knew of evil and its power. They had always had freedom, but now the options of what to do with such freedom were placed before them. And for the first time in all the existence of Adamah, love was not ultimately prevailing, and selfishness overpowered them like a lion upon its prey. Immediately, Brother was turned against brother, and sister against sister. For without the covering of the love of King Jireh, they saw each other as they really were: selfish, prideful, arrogant. King Jireh instantly knew what his people had done. He was grieved to the pit of his heart. He was betrayed by his own people. He pleaded with them to tell him why had they done such a thing. But they all pointed to Draco and his conniving ways, denying their own crime. Jireh could not hear no more. His heart was broken, and for his people. He had given them a life of love and joy with no pain, no sorrow. But they had rejected it all for a mere moment of vain satisfaction. There was no longer a place for him in Adamah. He loved his people beyond a love you or I could ever understand. But he could not force them to love him in return, for love is a choice. Their hearts now denied all he was, all he stood for. He could no longer rule and live amongst his people. He had no choice. And like an act of an illusionist, King Jireh disappeared. Days turned to months, and months turned to years. Draco sat on his throne, pleased with how well things turned out. Soon after the loss of King Jireh, they called to him to be their new king, just as he planned. Who would have thought it would be so easy to rid of Jireh and contain Adamah's inhabitants? He ruled Adamah as he pleased, with no further trouble. But it was also that very thought that caused him restless nights. Why was it so easy? It was unlike Jireh to go down without a fight, but he had. Draco knew in the pit of his black heart something was stirring. Something was not right. And someone was about to ruin all he had cheated and lied for. He would have to stop him, whoever he was. How do you stop someone you don't know? What if he does not even exist yet? But wait, that was it. Draco remembered an old legend of Adamah. If ever King Jireh left his throne, a child would be born, the son of Jireh. The government would rest on his shoulders. His name would be Wonderful and Counselor. He would be the Prince of Peace. Draco could not let this happen. If Jireh was going to play this game, so was he. Kill all the baby boys under 2 years of age, he ordered his army. He would stop at nothing. More than 30 years had passed. Adamah, now a ravaged village, was drained of all hope by the iron fist of Draco. Depravity settled in, a deep and resonating depravity they knew all too well. What they first thought was freedom, in the end was a prison. The hills that were once covered in heather and clover now lay barren and gray. Sickness was on every doorstep, and hunger was in the bellies of all who resided there. Even their own children were taken from them, never to be heard from again. The mere whisper of the name Jireh brought judgment and the thought of hope forbidden. They had dug their own grave. Now, everyone in Adamah was not hopeless and accepting of their fate, for then we would not have a story. There was one who stood alone. Her name was Verity. She was born long after the time of Jireh, but believed there was a future and a hope for her and her people beyond the reign of Draco. No one in the village was caught trying to escape more times than she. Despite all the threats and discouragement, she never let go of her faith and the search for truth. If she knew what hopelessness was, then somewhere there must be hope. Verity never lost heart, but failure was bringing her to the point of exhaustion. Would she ever succeed? She ignored the mockers. She knew in the pit of her stomach she was right, but she needed more. A sign, the light at the end of the tunnel, something visible. If Verity only knew that years ago a child was born in Adamah that escaped with his mother, and the path was already paved for the one who is the light that will shine through the darkness. Hope itself was just a breath away. Draco still sat on his throne. No one rose up to be the man of the legend. Adamah's inhabitants were still enslaved. Everyone was in misery, so why was he so displeased? It was the legend that haunted him. He did all he could. Only time could tell.
Auntie, I thought you said this was a fairy tale.
What do you mean?
Well, so far the king is gone. There's no prince or princess. The story's way too sad to be a fairy tale.
The story has only just begun.
All I'm saying is, where's the good stuff?
Would you like for me to finish the story or not?
Yes.
All right. Adamah received no visitors, for all who entered was never allowed to leave again. Who would willingly walk into such a place knowing how their life would change? But today brought surprise to all in such a visitor. He was a young man no one had ever seen before. Everyone was stirred with curiosity as to who this man could be. Was he the one able to free them? Or was he just a crazy man? His name was Gau. He was a man of no importance and no real success in life. His family was average, and his life in general was average. From the outside, many of the villagers could not see more than just a man crazy for entering Adamah. Although, like a book, you cannot judge a man by his cover. For if they only knew, he was the only baby boy who escaped that frightful night so many years ago, and the only son of King Jireh. He would have been thought of as anything but ordinary. Verity was more than excited to meet their new arrival. Someone from the outside. Oh, the things they might know. Even beyond that, from the first moment she saw Gau enter the village, her heart skipped a beat as if telling her something important. Was he truly here to save them? Could such a presumably ordinary man be the answer? In these questions, she was not alone, for there truly was something different about Gau. Gau walked through the village. The faces he saw held hurt and sorrow. He just arrived, but he knew his time was sacred and there was much to be done. He knew he could not change everyone's heart, but he was there for a purpose, and he would give his own life for it. Gau felt the longing and curiosity of Verity, and her close friends, Joanna, Maimina, and Delilah. He called them to follow him. Despite their fear, what other answer could they give a man who was removing the dark clouds above? They followed him with their whole hearts. The time for healing was now at hand.
Come, let
Draco was outraged. How could this happen? The villagers were no longer fearing the name of Draco, but rejoiced in a man named Gaul, a nobody. This must be taken care of quickly before things got out of hand. He would have to be captured. No, better yet, just kill him. His army instantly followed his orders, but to no avail. Gaul was unstoppable. It was then that Draco knew he had to work from the inside out. At least one of his followers had to have a weak point. Every word that came from Gaul's mouth was noble, pure, and true. There were still villagers whose hearts remained unsoftened, but many listened and found themselves believing his every word. His followers were daily amazed by him and all he did. Despite all the good he had done, Gaul had a heavy heart. He sat with his followers one cold evening and told them the things that were to come. With a soft and low voice, he told them his time to leave them was near. His true purpose still needed to be fulfilled. They all looked at one another in shock. Joanna spoke out asking, how could he leave them all alone like this? He responded saying again, his true purpose still needed to be fulfilled. He continued on telling them he did not come to heal the body alone, but heal the souls of Adamah. This came at a high price only he could pay. He would be betrayed by one of them, one of his own, and killed by Draco. The last words he spoke and sent chills and panic through them. Was he speaking the truth? How could they go on without him? And who was the one to betray him? Gaul broke their hearts and their thoughts, saying, she who sat at his side will betray him. Delilah rose to her feet, asking if it was she. Gaul's reply was silent, but she knew her shame and left into the dark of the night.
How could Delilah do something like that? Gal has been so nice to her. She's not going to go through with it, is she?
I don't know. People can do just about anything with the right incentive.
Incentive?
Well, for instance, someone will commit a crime for money or materials. In Delilah's case, fear and self-preservation.
But is she really going to betray him? And what does Gal mean by saying he will be killed?
Well, let's find out. Later that evening, Gaul sat under the stars, thinking of his future that would soon be the present. His followers sat not far from him, but their hearts felt like miles away. His body trembled at the thought of the coming hours. He cried out to his father, "Save him from what was to come." But he knew it was the only way. He would do it. He had to. All would be lost without the sacrifice of his life. As he cried, the stars above began to dance. Gau was pulled from his thoughts at the presence of Delilah. As she neared him, he caught sight of the soldiers behind her. His time had come. Delilah only needed one look from Gau to know what she had done. She betrayed the best man she ever knew. She betrayed the friend of friends, the savior of Adamah. She ran away in regret and shame, and the village never saw her again. Gaul stood before Draco on trial, already beaten and battered. Pain shot through his body, but no fear rushed through his veins. Blood ran down his face, but there was no sweat of anxiety on his brow. He knew his fate and was ready. From the beginning of his life, he knew this was how it needed to be. Man was lost and needed a way to be saved. Draco read the list of Gaul's crimes to the gathering crowd, stirring a rebellion against Draco, feeding the hungry, healing the sick, giving rest to the restless, and hope to the hopeless. On and on it read. How such things could be a crime we'll never understand. Draco left the verdict of Gaul to the crowd. "What shall we do with this criminal?" asked Draco. Between the hearts of stone and hearts of fear, they shouted out, "Kill him!" For his own pleasure, Draco asked again. They only replied louder, "Kill him!" This was it. The time had come. As they led him to his death, he cried out to his father, not for himself, but for Adamah. He called out asking for forgiveness for all the wrongs and betrayals every man, woman, and child committed. In that moment, for the first time in his life, he knew complete separation and loneliness beyond what you and I have and ever will know. This was the death before his death. Soon, it was all over. Darkness covered all Adamah, and fear struck all. What had they done? Who really was this man? He held a greatness they had known only once before. Again they realized they had failed, and the tree of Adamah once again lost all signs of life.
Wait, how can he be gone? Why didn't he even try to escape or fight?
What do you mean?
I thought he was going to save Adamah from Drago. Who can save them now? This is not fair.
Sometimes life is not what we think it should be, and it is definitely not always fair.
But why did he not even try? It's like he gave up.
Maybe it was not giving up.
Then what was it?
Perhaps love, and even sacrifice.
Love and sacrifice.
Well, we have already discovered he was not a crazy man, so he must have had some reason. The only logical conclusion would be love and self-sacrifice.
I think I understand, but why?
I am sorry to disappoint you, dear. Would you like me to stop?
No, I mean, could you please finish reading the story?
Of course I will. The followers could not believe Gaul was gone. He was their only hope. They fully gave their trust to him. The dark clouds were rolling back over Adamah. They buried Gaul on the outskirts of the village in the remains of the forest. Draco was not taking any more chances and placed 2 guards at his grave. There was no way his plans were going to be interrupted again. 3 days later, Verity and Mimina went to Gaul's grave to pay their respects. The last few days of their lives were ones they wished they could forget, but they had to see his grave with their own eyes. As they approached the site, they were expecting trouble from the guards. There were none to be found. Suddenly they saw 3 heavenly beings clothed in white standing before an empty grave with the good news that forever changed history. Elsewhere in the forest, Gaul stood amongst lifeless trees. There had not been a green leaf or a flower in bloom since the day Draco took the throne of King Jaira. Now, with the new life Gaul brought, the forest began to awaken and rejoice for the risen true king. Verity and Mimina ran back to Joanna and Leah as quickly as they could tell them of what they had seen and heard. They could not believe them. Their minds were decided. Gaul was gone. Leah spoke out, saying if she could touch him with her own hands, only then she would believe. She turned around to exit the room, but found she stood face to face with the one who was proclaimed dead, but was now full of life. She reached up and touched his face, and knew instantly she was a fool for not believing, and fell to her face. Gaul was alive. Draco was past the point of fury. How could he be alive? He saw him die. Could his own eyes have deceived him? Draco gathered his whole army together for one last battle with Gaul. One last battle for all of Adamah. They marched in the center of the village where they found Gaul. He stood unmoved as they marched. The army of Draco drew closer and closer, and still he remained. Then, with a twinkle in Gaul's eye, he smiled a smile one gives when they know something no one else knows. Suddenly, an army twice the size of Draco's came to the side of Gaul. Fear struck Draco and his army. This battle's fate was known before it even began.
story is turning out to be a perfect fairy tale.
Well, it's about time.
Drago has been chased away as well as the soldiers. The village is now freed. Gowl is alive, but there's one thing I still don't understand.
What is that?
Whatever happened to King Jaira?
Well, let's find out. The effects on Adamah brought on by Gaul filled everyone with joy and life. The dark cloud was finally gone, and gone for good. Immediately after the overthrow of Draco, did the people clearly see who Gaul reminded them of. In the eyes of Gaul, all the hidden stories of King Jaira came to life, and there was no doubt who he was, the son of Jaira, the Prince of Peace, and the true Prince of Adamah. Many people asked Gaul where the king had gone and why he never returned. Gaul revealed his father had never left but watched them every day of every long, miserable year, protecting them from the could-have-beens and providing all they needed to survive. The people could not believe it. How was it that they could not see him? If he was in fact there, it was then they learned believing is not always seeing, and seeing is sometimes looked past the hardening of our own hearts. They finally saw how there was an unexplainable protection, despite all the evils Draco had done, and knew it was true. Gaul taught them many other things regarding life and how to live it well. Finally, one day, Gaul spoke, saying it was time for him to go home to his father. Everyone was in shock, not knowing what he meant. None was so surprised as Verity, who without knowing had given Gaul her heart and loved him more with each passing day. He only continued to say it was time to go home to his father and prepare the castle for the day they too would go home there.
Wait. What is this?
Now what?
But how can he go? I thought he was going to be the prince and take Verity as his princess, and they live happily ever after.
There's only one page left. Are you going to argue about it?
No.
All right. They begged him to stay, but he replied, saying unless he left, he could not send the one who would teach them even greater things. A spirit as old as he and his father. He was of the same mind and heart. Though they did not fully understand, they trusted him. Before Gaul was caught up into the sky, he left one final word to the people of Adamah, a reassurance. A day would come when he and his army would return and rescue them forever, and they would live with him in his father's house. Knowing the true love Verity had for him, he looked at her with all the love in his heart and repeated he would come back, never to doubt it. Instantly Gaul, who once stood amongst them, now was being carried up to his father where he belonged. Many years have passed. Adamah still waits, none so much as Verity. Yet they hold on to the spirit sent and the words of Gaul. Many call them crazy or even deceived, but they remember the goodness that once lived amongst them and the last words he spoke. He would come back. Never doubt it. The end. So what did you think?
Well, it was not my happily ever after, but somehow I am not disappointed. It was also as if I've heard this story before.
That does not surprise me. The story runs through your blood as mine.
What do you mean, Aunt? Ah, I got it. You're Verity, Aunt Ver.
It is true. I was hoping you would figure it out.
So let me get this straight. How long have you been waiting?
The time is not what matters, but what I do with the time that does. Nonetheless, it has been a long wait filled with anticipation. All right, now it's really time for bed.
Okay, good night. Aunt Verity never doubt it.
Good night, my dear.
I told you.
Go!
Are you ready to go, my princess?
Oh, so long. For so long.